we were talking about Thibodeau. The first episode we did is maybe the number 1 overall pick. Now he's at 9. A lot of mocks he's outside of the top 10.
Yep.
Why has he fallen? He hasn't played a single game. Because of personality stuff. It's because the more and more we get closer to the draft, the more we're learning the league doesn't like the way he behaves. And so personality is such a huge part of this process. And teams will use Baker as an example of when you get personality wrong, it blows up in your face in a really big way.
Let's just start with Baker. So Baker requested a trade before the Deshaun Watson deal actually happened, just when the Browns were trying to get Watson. And Baker wanted to go to Indianapolis. So the Colts just traded for Matt Ryan. So he's not going to Indianapolis. We're going to get to the Matt Ryan Colts trade in a bit. But the Falcons were, they just signed Marcus Mariota to replace Matt Ryan. The Saints just re-signed Jameis Winston. So Baker's kind of running out of teams he's going to go to.
Right.
So DK, as you see it right now, you want to tell us about this quarterback landscape? Like, who even needs a quarterback right now?
So the Seahawks and the Panthers, I guess, are the first two that come to mind. Obviously, you could throw in a couple other teams
Houston
that could still use. Yeah, like Houston. I think even Pittsburgh is, a team that not necessarily completely set. Yeah. There's
Seattle.
a couple teams like that. Yeah. Seattle.
Are you talking about in terms of Baker or
I
the
said
draft?
Seahawks first. Don't worry.
Don't worry. I've said it 3 more times just to make sure it's in there.
Damn you. But I think honestly, like the two big ones right now, it feels like are the Panthers and the Seahawks. As of Monday, it's 1:20 p.m. Pacific time. It doesn't really feel like the Seahawks are going to make this trade. Baker Mayfield does come with an $18 million plus cap hit for 2022. And so I don't even know if the Seahawks can get that with all the signings that they've made over the last couple of weeks or last week or so. And then also I think they still have to get a cornerback. They still have to get an offensive tackle or 2. So I don't know if the Seahawks are really set up right now to go get a guy like Baker Mayfield. Maybe if he gets released, they could sign him. And honestly, that's kind of where it feels like it's going. Like, I think Baker Mayfield may end up just getting released.
Which is nuts.
Yeah.
You think he's going to get cut straight up?
Maybe. I mean, so look, the Browns obviously signed Deshaun Watson for all this money. And then they traded Case Keenum. And then they signed Jacoby Brissett to be their backup. So it feels, based on those moves, it feels like they're just moving on from Baker.
Well,
and
Baker's never taking another snap in a Browns uniform, practice or otherwise.
Yeah, that's for sure. But they traded Case Keenum because Case Keenum was like the veteran teacher for Baker. They don't need him, but like Baker's gone. But you don't think anyone will throw a draft pick out for Baker?
Well, I think it's the 18 mil. It's the 18 mil that is the problem.
Yeah, but where's Baker's status right now in the league? Like, I know he had a bad year because he was incredibly injured, which I don't think people are really talking about enough. He was incredibly injured this year.
He kept hurting his shoulder, which is obviously a big deal.
Yeah, like, is his stock lower than it should be, Ben?
I don't like it, honestly. It's kind of funny. I was thinking about that when I was prepping for the pod, like trying to figure out how much is the league like this draft class, and it feels like they like it more than Baker's 2021 season. We have found like the floor, and now we have to figure out like where the ceiling is in terms of how much they like it. Just because you haven't seen this response for Baker. For me, I think that I don't think anybody's expecting to get a high caliber starter out of Baker anymore. I don't think anybody's expecting to get Kirk Cousins out of Baker anymore, which I think Baker was squarely placed on that Kirk Cousins scale last year. I don't think anybody's even thinking we can get there. So what, you getting a Goff, right? You get like a discount Kirk Cousins out of Baker. Goff was a throw-in part of the Stafford deal where the Rams also had to send extra picks to make the Lions take on the contract. Right. You know what I mean? Danny's point about I think it's 18.9 million is very well taken. That's the amount of money Baker is due this year. It's his 5th year option. 2018, 19, 20, 22. I always have to count. 5th year option. Because he has 3 accrued seasons, that number is negotiable, right? Baker is eligible for negotiations. So there's a chance that you give him a extension, but it's not really an extension. It just lowers that number and it makes it a little bit easier to trade for him. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar narrative to what we saw with Amari Cooper from Dallas, where it was like, all right, we've been trying to trade him. Looks like we're going to cut him. And then a little bit later, it's like, oh, we got to trade. Because once the team realizes like, all right, we can move the Browns off Baker for like nothing, then there becomes a little mini bidding war for, all right, are we willing to spend a 6th to make sure we're the guy who gets him, a 5th to make sure we're the guy who gets him? But we're looking at that sort of territory, right? Like day 3 pick and a throw in, veteran player and a day 3 pick, something like that, in order to get Baker onto your team.
This is the former top overall pick.
That's just kind of amazing. Yeah, I think so. But it seems crazy when you said that, but I think that what helps is if you kind of go through the teams that still need a quarterback. And I think there's 2 buckets. There's the teams who definitely need a quarterback, But really, it's just the Panthers. Like they still need someone for this year.
Poor Panthers.
Kind of just the Panthers. And if they got Baker, how weird would it be if Sam Darnold and Baker were on the same team? They're the top 2 picks in one draft, and like they're kind of friendly. Darnold and like Josh Allen are like good friends. But like Darnold, that would just be weird. And they also would both be on the 5th-year option, which would be strange.
I know. I was gonna say, like, it's ironic because they already gave Darnold his 5th-year option, which is $18.9 million. So like they'd be paying 2 quarterbacks almost $20 million, to duke it out to be terrible.
When the Browns drafted Baker and the Jets drafted Darnold, both expected that eventually they would be paying $40 million for that quarterback. The Panthers get to play $40 million for both. What a win.
It's weird. And so, but if you go through the other teams, now there's a bunch of teams that don't have a quarterback of the future, but they don't need to get one this year. They can wait till 2023 with a much stronger group. So that group is the Falcons, who now could ride Mariota till they get someone. Detroit has Goff, and they could ride Goff. Still, they have Seattle has Drew Lock, who I kind of think Seattle might do it with Drew Lock. They might roll him. Yeah. They've got the Giants, who I think they're Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor. They're very happy to play that out.
Pittsburgh.
The Eagles have Jalen Hurts. The Steelers have Trubisky, but like they need to get someone else eventually. And then Texans are the Texans. It seems like the Texans are fine with Davis Mills for one more year.
Yeah,
love that.
As they should be.
First of all, big picture. That is 6 teams in the NFC and 2 in the AFC. That's crazy. But the other one is when you go through that list. Is Baker just already a backup quarterback?
Is he ever going to start a week 1 again?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think he could start a week 1 this year. I think he could if he lands in Carolina or if he lands in Houston. I think that's going to be a camp competition situation, assuming no other rookie quarterbacks are added. And even then, if it's not like a trade up for a first round guy, we typically see that be camp competition. Like even Trey Lance this year was camp competition, right? So there's a chance, right? And we have to remember. You've activated Baker's trap card, right? The whole thing with Baker is that he is a vindictive son of a gun.
He's like MJ.
He remembers,
just way worse.
Yes, exactly. Just not as good at his sport.
Way worse at actually
He's like
playing.
baseball MJ. Baker Mayfield is Michael Jordan, baseball era. And so you have... I do think we're going to see a healthier Baker and a more motivated Baker, and I do think that's a better Baker Mayfield than the one who was in Cleveland, kind of, throwing darts at Duke Johnson for not, for wanting to be traded out of Cleveland when he was like running back 3. You know what I mean? But I do think like in terms of draft lessons, right? Because like Heifetz, you said like this is astounding to me. Like, this was the first overall pick. The draft lesson here is about Kayvon Thibodeau. It's about the way that players who have big personalities get talked about and consumed by NFL general managers, right? One of the main reasons Baker went 1 in a class that had Sam Darnold and Josh Allen and Josh Rosen, all of whom were top 10 picks, and then also Lamar Jackson, who was 32nd overall or whatever. One of the main reasons Baker went 1 is because of the way he behaved. And that was something that John Dorsey and the Browns team at the time read as cool. This is how we want our quarterback to be.
That's ironic.
We want him to be this angry, motivated guy. Exactly. And then lo and behold, it turns out that doesn't look as fun when you're expecting this guy to be a professional while you're losing some football games. Yeah. You realize that while he was at Oklahoma, you didn't really see that other side of this because Oklahoma didn't lose a lot of ball games, right? And so the way that Baker was understood, and then the fallout of that is a big part of why I don't think there's a market for him. I think on the field alone, teams would want Baker in the building, but the Browns have done a big job in like referencing that Baker is not the sort of professional personality. They need a quote an adult in the room, as Chris Mortensen said, right? Which is like horrible now in context. But I need an adult in the room implies that Baker's a kid, and NFL teams don't want to bring that kid in. So then you look at Kayvon Thibodeau, who isn't like Baker in terms of like the vindictiveness, or isn't like Baker in terms of the kind of moxie or whatever. It's just like he has outside interests. He's a big personality. And he talks about what he loves. Kayvon is like not in the top 10 of a lot of mocks. Like DK, I don't know where you have him, but he's falling right now.
I've got him going to the Seahawks at 9.
Yeah. So like in Vegas odds, right? Like we were talking about Thibodeau. The first episode we did is maybe the number 1 overall pick. Now he's at 9. A lot of mocks he's outside of the top 10.
Yep.
Why is he falling? He hasn't played a single game because of personality stuff. It's because the more and more we get closer to the draft, the more we're learning the league doesn't like the way he behaves. And so personality is such a huge part of this process. And teams will use Baker as an example of when you get personality wrong, it blows up in your face in a really big way.
So but is the personality stuff with Baker just overshadowing the fact that he was bad on the field? Like Odell Beckham Sr. didn't put a clip of Baker like the Progressive commercials. I think the Progressive commercials are fine if Baker's playing well. Right. I think Baker was bad.
So it overshadows it. It absolutely does. That matters more. The Browns are moving off of Baker because he was bad on the football field. There's no two ways about that. But you get to use this as a crutch. The Browns in this case are using it as a crutch to justify trading for Deshaun Watson, which is just like awful in and of itself. But when teams sit down in draft rooms now, in the month of March, in the month of April, and they talk about Thibodeau, they will have the narrative that's being spun about Baker in their heads. And that's how the draft cycle works, right? These guys are in the league for 20 years and they have all these anecdotes. And they have all these one-off examples of like, well, he's a real competitive kid, but so is Mayfield. So is 6 out of Oklahoma. And you saw what happened with him. You know what I mean? He couldn't handle it. And then you end up getting like these pseudo psychology, like how do we make sure that he'll be good when he's losing? And how do we make, perfect leader, yada, yada, whatever. Like, this whole like leadership complex, NFL style personality complex has been a huge thing in the draft space in the last 10, 15 years. And it's because of stories like Mayfield, where the real thread is that he was bad on the field. But what scouts are going to take away and talk about is his personality.
Yeah. So, that's the same deal with Carson Wentz. And the reason that the Colts traded Wentz is because the personality thing. It's not like he was like so bad they couldn't possibly stand playing with him next year. It was like he was bad. Also, no one respects this guy or whatever the case may be. I'm putting words in their mouth. So, obviously that's just me speculating. But like that's a big part of the reason that they traded this guy. Despite the fact they gave up a first round pick for him. This whole conversation reminds me a lot, too, of just why it's so difficult and why so many teams miss on draft picks, because you can watch the tape. You can get a pretty good idea. I think people can get pretty good at evaluating how good someone is at football. Like that's something that's more quantifiable, I guess, but it's very difficult to predict how a person is going to react to adversity and react in specific situations when they're 21 years old or 20 years old in a couple of years or whatever, and how are they going to react to all this pressure and all these things that happen, like Sam Darnold got mono, or whatever. And it actually reminds me of a conversation I heard. I can't remember. It was on a draft pod, and they were, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah, but forgive me if it wasn't, but it was basically like some teams have put a lot of stock actually in guys that have gone through adversity. So like, even if they have sort of, some interesting or potentially negative things that happened in their life before, like for instance, like Matt Corral has admitted to having problems with alcohol. He quit drinking. And so some teams may look at that and it's like, oh, that's a red flag. But other teams will say like, this guy's got grit. He had a problem in his life. He corrected it. Now he's not drinking, and he understood what that adversity meant, and and the way he reacted to it, that like becomes like a conditioned mental response or whatever to adversity. So I actually have heard this term, and I think it's so interesting. The Seahawks have been really into grit over the years. Angela Duckworth, who wrote the book Grit, I think the way she put it is you get inoculated in how you react to adversity. It's like it's almost like a vaccine, like your body and your mind can react to like that adversity better, like going forward. I think it's so fascinating. But this is, again, getting to all the psychological stuff about the draft. But I just think that's why it's so hard. It's not the football stuff. I mean, that obviously is not easy, but like the mental stuff is so hard, especially at quarterback.
I agree with what you're saying, but I also come back to, I increasingly view the draft as a wood chipper, that all the good prospects go to bad teams and the bad teams ruin them. And then we wonder what was wrong with the quarterbacks. And I think half of them would be fine on other teams. And if they went to better teams, look at this 2018 draft. Baker Mayfield went to the Browns. The Browns fucking suck. Like, they have a terrible owner.
Well, are we going to call the Bills who drafted Josh Allen good? Are we going to do that?
Yes, the Bills made the playoffs with Sean McDermott 2 years before Josh Allen showed up. Like, it was a terrible playoff game, but Sean McDermott dragged them to a playoff quality team. Like, with the same head coach. The Browns have had, how many big coaches did Baker have? 4? With 3 or 4 different offenses in 4 years for Baker. Yeah. Sam Darnold with the Jets had Adam Gase. Like those guys got screwed up. Josh Allen, don't think of it this way. Josh Allen went to a playoff team. And then Lamar Jackson went to a team that was 9-7, I believe, the year and before. Those guys made it. Josh Rosen, who went to the Cardinals, didn't make it. Like, at some point, you kind of look back, and I feel very strongly, increasingly, that the guys going to the awful teams just have worse odds. Which isn't rocket science, but we never talk about it.